This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Big time episode of The Baseline NBA podcast. We are doing a co-collab, a collaboration. It's kind of like Red and Meth getting together in the lab and deciding to basically bring Def Squad and the Woo to merge and have this great conversation as we start veering towards part two of the 2024-25 NBA season. And it's a great time to be a part of the NBA, obviously, fresh off of NBA All-Star Weekend, and we are now getting ready to ramp up to that final stretch. We'll be able to determine which 20 teams have access to the upcoming NBA playoffs. And to be able to have that conversation, Shaw and I basically were like, bumping heads and decided to say, let's do this right. Let's not just have it coming from one perspective. We're going to have it coming from multiple perspectives. So in order to make this happen, man, we have got two of the premier analysts, commentators, co-hosts who are currently doing it right now in the basketball podcasting space, the best to do it right now. We got our man, as always. He always does fine with me, my man Desmond Powell. He is the host of Hip to the Games, part of the 19 Media Group family. And then also with us, we got our man, Derrick Meyers, co-host of Sideline Guys of OTS Media, joining us as well, too. If you're not familiar with these two shows, you need to get up on it. These guys are always on keeping the pulse with everything that's going on with the NBA. Derrick, Desmond, thank you for hopping on board. Fellas, cannot wait for us to discuss everything going on so far with NBA All-Star Weekend and the other half of the NBA season.
Yes, sir. Thanks for inviting me on to the show. It's been a good time to watch you guys from afar. So excited to join you guys.
Always an honor to come back, Cal.
As always, man. So before we do that, I want to give an opportunity, Derrick, for you to kind of introduce our listeners, not just your listeners, but also introduce our listeners as well to your show, what your media is doing, what's going on in your world. Give people a taste of who you are to our listeners.
Yes, sir. Well, my name is Derrick Meyers. I'm the owner of OTS Media. It's a company I started about actually 8 years ago now to get into podcast production before it got popular. But I
boom, right.
That's back when you had to actually do the hard work of uploading to Apple Podcasts and all your artwork and everything. Now it's just really easy to do. Back then it was a struggle. So I co-host the Sideline Guys. We cover various sports on there. My co-host on there is Chris Negron. We cover basketball, baseball. Well, about to get into baseball. Basketball, MMA, doing wrestling, football, all the stuff. So, this past year has been very exciting because basketball side, I'm a Celtics fan. Football side, I'm an Eagles fan. So it's been a very, very prosperous year.
You are so fluorescent right now. The green is just effervescent.
It is what it is. It pops with the eyes,
Absolutely. And for our listeners, obviously, everybody knows about our man Desmond Powell, Hit to the Games. Desmond, though, I think people need a reminder. It's kind of like, when Red and Meth get back on the stage and everything. I know everybody is on that new joint, la, 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 la. But sometimes it got to be reminded about the Rockweiler. So put people on, Desmond, about Hip to the Games, your show, what's been going on, recently nominated. You know what I'm saying? Give us the 411 on what's been going on with you, brother.
Yes, sir. So, hey, every other Friday it's the same thing, man. Either I'm showing love to what's going on in the NBA, or even recently, right, what happened in the WNBA offseason. I like to tap into a lot of those topics, as we all do. But of course, I like to fit some room as well for hip hop conversations as well, and just really change the game for good is what I always say, and change the way we talk about hip hop, change the way we talk about basketball, and the players who play the sports, and the people who participate in hip hop. I always I don't take it lightly, as you know, Cal, of what it means to carry that torch of what hip hop represents. So whether that's through song breakdowns and lyrics and album reviews, things of that nature, whatever it is, I always try to find a way to do that on my show. So that's pretty much the basis of Hip to the Games. But of course, a lot I can stay on one side of the spectrum. I can combine two in one episode. It's a lot going on. So I just encourage our listener here to join the fun every other Friday and find out where they fit in the spectrum and how the rhythm of Hip to the Games is.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And one of the wonderful things about your show, especially too, is that it helps bridge the gap for our young listeners, and then also for our generation, our older generation as well too, who's kind of followed along with some of the real poignant moments that go into not just music but also sports, and when the two have combined and have had its impact. So it's kind of ironic that us individually have a perspective to give, because I think one of the most intriguing topics of conversation that has taken place, and we'll get to it in a moment, is in regards to NBA All-Star Weekend and it happening in San Francisco in the Bay area, right? And I found it really, really amazing, the rich history that emanates from the Bay Area, not just from a basketball perspective, but even from a music perspective as well too. And I think it was an interesting take that was delivered over the course of the weekend to help remind people about how important the Bay is, as far as elevating the legacy of what we're now seeing, elevating the culture and the shield of the NBA through not just its artists, but also the way that the game was played, and also how music has come from those areas as well too. So we'll get into that in a few moments. And then a little bit later on, we're going to touch on our perspective about what's going to be taking place, part 2 of the NBA season, the home stretch, where teams now are going to definitely be jockeying for top seeded position, and which teams we possibly believe have an opportunity to get into the play-in tournament in order to determine a path forward for them to possibly, make a run towards the NBA final. So a lot of stuff to get into, but as always, we appreciate everybody for hopping on board with us this week. As always, be sure to get at my man Shaw, at Shaw Sports NBA. You can get at me at Game Face Lee. The show's to had NBA Baseline available on all the major platforms. If you catch us on YouTube channel, we like to say hello. And if you see the blue and white logo, that lets you know that we are with the 19 Media Group family. 19 Media Group, we running these content streets. So be sure to go to www.19mediagroup.com, not to just check out this episode, but the plethora of content creators that basically covers anything for your listening pleasure, whether it's music, entertainment, sports, culture, you name it. 19 Media Group has got it. And also, along with collaboration of OTS Media, be sure to check out, as I've said earlier before, Derrick Meyers, co-host of the Sideline Guys, and everything that they've got going on in their space as well too. This is basically a flourishing of great content for your listening pleasure, so you will not miss out, as what we deliver to you is what you'd like to hear. So before we get into that, talking about NBA All-Star Weekend, got to make sure we do the plugs. So remember, Prize Picks is offering weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts that will be available in more than 30 states, whether it's California, Texas, Georgia, and Florida. Prize Picks is truly the best way for you to win real money with all the various opportunities to play and collect your winnings. Due to the enormous selection of players and stat types available, you can mix and match your playing strategies based on personal preferences. Do you think Steph Curry will get more than 5 3-pointers next week? Do you think Giannis will have more than 35 points? You cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season with you and your crew when you run your game on Prize Picks. I might take Wemby for more than 2 blocks and Luka for more than 8 assists next week. And for those who like a quick win, Prize Picks is the way to go. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. So what are you waiting for? Download the app today and use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Remember, with Prize Picks, it's as easy as picking more or picking less. Again, the promo code is CLNS to get $50 after you play your first $5 lineup. The Baseline is rocking with Prize Picks, and you should too. Prize Picks, run your game. Coming up, Cal, Desmond, Derrick, we talk NBA All-Star Weekend. And a little bit later on, we'll get into the second half of the season. Don't go anywhere. We're back. Kali, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast, and our special guest with us here to talk about NBA All-Star Weekend. Our man, Desmond Powell, hip to the games, and Derrick Meyers, co-host of the Sideline Guys. Let's get right into it, fellas. I'm gonna start with you, Derrick. You know, not that you're a rookie or anything like that. You're quite the vet. But I'm gonna start with you. I wanted to get your perspective about the NBA All-Star Weekend in its totality. We'll get a little bit into the winners and losers and things of that nature, but I just wanted to get your overall perspective of what you thought the NBA All-Star Weekend was like for you.
Well, it wasn't that great. I'll put it to you like that. I haven't enjoyed All-Star Weekend in years. I remember growing up looking forward to it. 'Cause I grew up with basic cable, so I wasn't able to catch a lot of different games throughout the year. But All-Star Game, I could watch that, and it doesn't feel the same. So I see where the league is going right now in terms of trying to, breathe new life into the weekend itself. I think that I think they did a good job in terms of the execution, and the results of it. I'm not too sure where that lands right now, but overall, the weekend was cool. I think there's definitely a lot of things they could tweak, but it wasn't bad. It was a little bit better than last year. I'll give them that. A little bit better than last year. I can't remember the last time I actually watched a full All-Star game. So
that's saying that, and that's saying a lot. So Desmond, what were your hits and misses? Give me things that you probably thought was really good, and things that you were like, oh, they completely whiffed on this.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, there's the obvious one, Mac McClung doing the three-peat. It's funny. A lot of people are talking about how he jumped over the car. My favorite dunk was the homage to Aaron Gordon with the hoverboard. To me, honestly, was my favorite dunk. I would honestly, and this is no exaggeration when I say this though, that moment, and then when En Vogue came out, when they did the music in the actual game, those were probably the two hypest moments that I felt like we had the whole entire weekend. Obviously, it was great to see E40, Too Short, and everybody. I thought Raphael Sadiq did a really good job. Um, but I also felt like the NBA, you could kind of tell they were touching that rope of like, okay, let's make sure we keep the forward momentum before people start complaining that all this is going too long. But excuse me, I thought it should be we should have got even a greater musical experience, especially knowing what the Bay, what they mean to the culture and everything. But as far as the on court stuff, man, I don't really know. It's hard because I thought the Saturday events were kind of we've been spoiled a little bit the last few seasons, especially with the 3-point contest. So the fact that we had a regular quote unquote 3-point contest, I felt like that kind of missed because it was just so ordinary. Like no Buddy Hield went crazy, and that was like the first round, and that was really it. Um, I mean, as far as the actual game, I think for what a lot of people were saying, a lot of intermission stuff, a lot of peanut gallery stuff in between the game that really took away from the overall experience. And I think the words that I was seeing on my timeline were like sad, heartbroken, and that's all I could really feel at that time. Like as a fan of this league, it just felt sad to see the execution of the whole entire weekend be what it was. I mean, from Wemby and CP, they're messing up the skills challenge, and it's like that was the first domino to fall. Like I just have very like sad kind of vibes around it, man. Like that's really all I got, because to Derek's point, it just wasn't what it used to be. It just the standard wasn't there in terms of performance, I feel like, and it just kind of was a domino effect the rest of the weekend.
Yeah, this was just a perfect example of the NBA doing too much. Like they just did. I don't care what anybody wants to try and articulate whether they loved it, didn't love it. And I'm not saying based off of how you guys are expressing it. What I'm saying is it's like people are sugarcoating the fact that the NBA tried to make this a movie. The NBA tried to make this into this grandiose production. And whether or not this was the influence of San Francisco, I don't believe so. I think the NBA felt like it was so necessary to have all of this extra stuff going on, which again takes away from the essence of why people are supposed to be there for NBA All-Star Weekend. And I think this was where we've done this like year over year over year over, not just because of the low ratings and the complaints. It's the product. And now what you're trying to do is like you're trying to CGI your way into getting people to buy into, the brand of what the NBA gives you, when this has always been about the players and their buy-in to want to make this about the game that they play. This is so much about their brand. That's just me. That's just how I feel about it. And I can accept it if the NBA is willing to accept the fact that this no longer should be about what guys are going to do on the basketball court this weekend. It should be about them out there being with the fans and, making it more about the entertainment aspect and the branding aspect, the branding activation aspect. We need to stop trying to pump this thing up about the competitive level of what these guys are supposed to be doing when they get out there on the basketball court, because everything now is just all over the place. I just thought it was such a big miss with knowing that you have such richness in the history of the game of basketball there in San Francisco, in the Bay Area. This was a great opportunity for people to really understand what Bay Area hoops should have meant. The focus point should have been on that. And then they do these cheesy little things like Team T, TM, Team C, and then they got Team Shaq and Team Candace. And I just felt like, damn, man, that like this is like the TNT trying to pay reparations. You know what I'm saying? To the NBA paying TNT reparations for knowing that they're moving the TV rights over to Amazon. So everything has got to have Ernie Johnson. Everything has got to have Shaq. Everything has got to have anybody that's part of the TNT broadcasting booth. And I just felt like it took so much away from the reason why we're supposed to be having All-Star Night, All-Star Weekend. And, that was just my personal take from that aspect of it. There's so many other points that I could probably lay into from it. But there's one big thing that I think really stood out to me, and I wanted to get your perspective on this. And this leads into the NBA All-Star Night, and specifically about the dunk contest. When they had Vince Carter coming out there, and I'm not calling out Vince Carter. I think Vince Carter among one of the greatest NBA players that's been out there. I think what he did 25, 30 years ago with the NBA dunk contest in the Bay Area, I thought was one of the greatest dunk contest performances that we had ever seen. And if you also look at the people who participated in that dunk contest, had not Vince done what he did, we probably would have been talking about, Steve Francis and all those other guys and what they did, because what they did was, it was so phenomenal, but he was just on another level. But to have Vince Carter come out there and basically say, this isn't about me. This is about the new guys. But then you just finished doing a complete rerun of his dunks that night. And then you expect the new guys to come out there and try to match that. You know what I'm saying? First it made Vince look bad in a way, right? Not intentionally, but it made him look bad because it was about him. It was about the greatest moment that I think the NBA had in All-Star Weekend since that time frame. And then, then you got these guys going out there, and most of these guys are missing dunks. And then the only real competitiveness was Mac McClung and Stephen Castle. So, Derrick, I wanted to get your perspective from that. It really just bothered me that, again, the NBA doing too much for something that could have been elevated to a degree where we could be, again, we can begin to, again, appreciate the dunk contest and the participants participating in it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I actually think that one of the biggest things that the NBA is missing out on is the celebration of basketball, right? I think that this weekend can actually be that, moving forward. I think that's where they should actually put their focus, because if you keep trying to do these events, and I think, overall, the entertainment aspect of things will be able to be fixed in if you're paying attention to what it is that the story you're trying to tell. I think that in terms of the dunk contest itself, I agree with you. I think that they messed up with that, trying to make it about Vince Carter and then not make it about Vince Carter. I think if you want to actually make this event or bring it back to life, honestly, you have to just go get the dunkers. You have to go get the dunkers that we see on social media, stuff like that. You need those guys to come in and challenge Mac McClung, right? I think that honestly, if we are totally honest about this opinion, I think LeBron actually messed it up by not getting into it. So if you don't have your superstars buying into these type of events, they're not going to have a great product, because the stars are what attracts the audience. If you looked out into the audience, this was horrible. This was a horrible attendance. And I think that if you're able to bring in your superstars, that will actually fix that whole thing. I'm not sure that you're going to have guys go into the game that have the same amount of nerves that make them not be able to hit their dunks. And I think we should actually make a rule. If you can't hit your dunk in the first 2 tries, move on.
I don't even think it should be 2 tries. If you just can't hit your dunk, you just can't hit your dunk. But
yeah.
And Desmond, I want you to weigh in, because you brought up an excellent point, and it's going to lead into a moment. Draymond Green's comments with regards to the NBA All-Star format and the night. But to your point, Desmond, the slam dunk contest wasn't about picking anybody to come out there and dunk. And I'm not look, Mac McClung has saved the dunk contest for 3 years in a row. And Mac McClung has not as much sniffed the starting lineup of any NBA team that he's been able to play on, right? Matter of fact, if you remember last year, the Philadelphia 76ers signed him on as a two-way specifically to allow him to enter in order to give credibility to the fact that he arguably was the best dunker that the NBA has had because of the non-participation of the star players, which should tell you something, that even now, if you're trying to celebrate Mac McClung and his commitment to what he did for the dunk contest, you undermined him, right, by basically having Vince Carter doing all of that nonsense and then circumventing the fact that he should be playing on an NBA team. But that's another conversation for another day. It again, the NBA stepping on its own toes. And I wanted to get your perspective from that as far as what we've been seeing with how the NBA is handling the criteria that should be met if we're talking about the All-Star night, All-Star weekend, about it being the All-Stars coming out and doing All-Star things.
One hand, I agree with what both of you guys have said, that why All-Star is so special is because you have the opportunity to celebrate, and through that celebration, you educate fans. And I think that's what always stuck home with me as a young fan, because I knew that when I watched All-Star, even when I was single-digit years old, I knew that all these players were going to rub shoulders with legends, and I was going to get to hear a guy like Bill Russell talk about why he rebounds the way he rebounds and all these things. You get to hear Vince Carter talk about his approach for that dunk contest, how he says time and time again, I watched Dr. J over and over and over and over. I wanted to do that, right? And I think that does kind of, it represents Mac McClung, but then you remember that not everybody's like that. So I think the thing is, we get a Mac McClung because he did what Vince Carter did. He said, oh, I'm from a young age, this is what I want to do. I want to do that. I want to hold the dunk contest trophy. So I'm going to make sure, oh, okay, you got to make it. It's the standard to make it on your first try. You know, it's a lot like what we see in hip hop, Cal. Like, not everybody wants to rhyme the best, quote unquote, but there are those of us who really take pride in, yo, I want to have the best punchline. I want to say it the right way. I want to enunciate it the right way. It's no different than what we see in the dunk contest. Not everybody is going to take that same approach. Now, and even me, I looked back at some of the contestants of previous dunk contests, and it was when I realized we didn't really see these Avengers-like lineups really in unless it was like the 80s with Neek and Mike and Clyde and Spud. Outside of that, the dunk contest has been a lot of rookies. It's been a lot of young guys. It's been a lot of role players that you don't really see in rotation. You know, one of my favorite dunkers, obviously because we share a name, but Desmond Mason. I loved him growing up, but he was never this crazy rotational player getting 20 points a game. So I think there is a little bit of like a blurred line. I think we're so desperate for what we want the dunk contest to be. We feel like we have to get the Avengers. We have to get Ja. We have to get Zach. We have to get Aaron Gordon. We have to get Zion, Shaden Sharp, whoever you want to name. But I think that is a little bit unrealistic in the sense that hasn't always been what the dunk contest is. Now, granted, I said this on my YouTube channel as well. Given that there are all these athletes, oh yeah, we should absolutely see a star-studded dunk contest. But I think we it's just a little harder to get than we think because I just think the dunk contest hasn't always been what people think it's been. There's always been room for role players and young talent to show it off. And I understand that the thing that I'm worried about the most is that we need to get back to the standard of the dunk contest. I'm not harping on who is actually participating as much as I'm like, how about we just focus on getting back to where it was in terms of like, hey, this is the standard you're stepping into as a dunk contest participant. Then we probably would at least saw some better dunks from a guy like Andre Jackson or my guy Matas Buzelis, because they had, if you looked at it, they had some solid stuff. But again, like y'all said, it's the nerves, it's all these things that go into it. So that's my thoughts on the dunk contest. Like you said, I could say a lot more, but I just feel like we shouldn't harp as much as getting this Avenger lineup, but we should prioritize the standard of the competition. Then we can probably fall back in line, and then those guys will want to participate.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, Desmond, because, you know, one of the things that then happened after Mac McClung, you know, did some of his amazing dunks is you had John Morant and Giannis and Zach LaVine all kind of, you know, jumping on, you know, the internet in their own way, X and whatever other mediums, and saying, oh, yeah, you know, that might make me want to get into the dunk contest and things of that nature. And I think listen, we can have this conversation all day long. We can actually have an episode about this aspect of it if we really, really wanted to. The one thing I will say, though, is I think this is, again, where the NBA has to draw a line in the sand about what the expectations are for this particular event, like the three-point contest. And I'll give you another example of that. You cannot tell me that if you have Damian Lillard, who is a two-time, right, back-to-back three-point champion, that he can't even get out of the first round, because what determines or dictates that is that we keep changing up the MO and the style of the way that we're doing the three-point contest to make it more appealing. I'm sorry. Like Mac McClung and Damian Lillard, to me, earn the right that they should automatically be in the semis or the finals or whatever have you, because then I know what they're capable of doing. It's not for those guys to have to prove that over with the guys that are just coming in. You know what I'm saying? But again, we keep changing the standards. We keep changing the format. And then we get these kind of results where we get a Buddy Hield jacking up a 31 spot, and then he can't even hit anything broadside of the, you know what I'm saying, of the iron when the time comes for him to get into that spot. But then we don't even have Damian Lillard in that. And I'm not saying that Tyler Hero isn't deserving of winning it either. You know, just like to your point, Desmond, Jackson Jr. could have easily probably gone in and advanced. Stephon Castle obviously had great dunks, but we were still in awe about Mac McClung. So we didn't even have any momentum for Stephon Castle because Mac McClung was already dropping 50s in this particular dunk. And we only remember those two, right? In the end, we're talking about Mac McClung. Will we be talking about Stephon Castle moving forward? So again, I just feel like to kind of wrap up this aspect of the point, because we're going to get into the Draymond Green thing in a second. To me, the big thing has always been about where the NBA truly stands about where they want these events to be. Do you want to usher in those new guys, give them those roles and opportunities? Or to your point, do you really do want it to be about it, a star-studded event, and the John Morants and Giannis is stepping in and participating in it? I, again, say if this is about the All-Stars have to want to be in it. And if it's going to be about the young guys, the new guys, then give them the pathway for them to feel confident about doing it instead of undermining them when you put with the production of how you lay these things out, the formats of how you do it. That is my perspective on it. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Let's move right into the Draymond Green thing, because his comments about, didn't care for the format. format sucks. This ain't basketball. He's not liking the rising stars. So I'm gonna start with you on this one, Desmond. What were your thoughts about Draymond Green's comments regarding the rising stars participating in the NBA All-Star night prime time? And does he have a valid point?
So yeah, I actually agreed with Draymond because that's actually what I was thinking when they first announced the format change. I had my episode a little after that, and I said the same thing in that one. Like, I felt like that fourth team, if that's what they were going to do, it should have been a team of snubs. I understand how that can look like, oh, we're just, these are the snubs. It's like we're making a big deal out of, these guys, we're like classing them out. But it's like there's such a collection of deserving all-star players. You could definitely, through a Demonis Sabonis and all these guys that got snubbed, and the thing I disagree with what Draymond did was that he went out of his way to keep bringing it up throughout the night. It wasn't like they put up a good fight against the OGs, right? There were a couple of possessions away. He just kept putting his foot down like they don't need to be here. They don't need to be here. And I thought that was extra. But in what he was saying, I did agree with him in his sentiments because you lose a little bit of the luster that comes with being an NBA All-Star. There was always something special about playing on that Sunday game. You hear Chris Paul talk about it all the time. Like, he didn't even go to an All-Star game until he got picked to be on the team. It brought forth that kind of motivation for him to say, you know what? The next time I come back here, I'm going to be in the Sunday game. And that's exactly what happened. It led to a great All-Star career for him. I think the NBA kind of missed the chance to be able to do that here. Like, I understand it's like you help the older veterans in this league play with some pride because they don't want to lose to the rookies, but it's like, well, now essentially you don't have to be an NBA All-Star to play in the All-Star game. And so I felt Draymond in that regard. That's why I agree with him.
All right, Derrick. So were you as curmudgeon as Draymond Green as Desmond so eloquently elevated onto that point, or did he need to lighten up a little bit on this, coming from where he's coming from?
Yeah, so I think of it like this. I think it was the right message, wrong person. Because to be honest with you, there's been a lot of stuff that Draymond's done that's not basketball on the court. So, I think it was correct in terms of saying, like, this is not how it should be done. The format is not the greatest. But I think, just like Desmond said, he kept harping on the point throughout the night, which I think was way too much. I think you make your point and then you analyze. If your whole...
But Derrick, real quick, do you think that was not just Draymond, but also TNT in a way, in order to elevate him being that controversial guy and him harping on this? Or do you think that was just natural born Draymond being Draymond?
I think that was Draymond being Draymond, to be honest with you. I think one of the things that if he's actually focused on making this a career after playing, I think your goal should be, hey, let me try and figure out how I can give my opinion and be fair in my analysis. And I don't think he was fair in his analysis. He gave his opinion, but he wasn't fair in breaking down the game, because the Rising Stars did give the OGs a good fight. They were they were right there. So let's not act as if they didn't raise the level of intensity on the floor. I haven't seen that type of intensity on the floor in, I don't know how, maybe the last time I saw that was when Kobe was playing. Like, right. I honestly can't remember that type of fight on the court from multiple people. Now, there are a couple of guys that for the last couple of years have played hard. One person in particular that sticks out is Jaylen Brown. He was one of those guys that he's always played hard. It doesn't matter what game we're playing. And I think that's one of the things that I've always appreciated about his game. So if bringing in Rising Stars is going to be the catalyst for hard play, then cool. Personally, I don't agree with it. I personally don't like the format. I think that there is Actually, we're actually discussing this on my show, of how a format could come into play that would bring that level of intensity, but also allow the right players to be on the floor. Because I don't think the Rising Stars make any sense. So can I give that to you real quick?
Oh yeah, please, by all means.
Okay. So you go back to the East-West format, right?
Right.
You're
An outcry by a lot of people now.
yes.
Oh, let's go back to the let's take it
Yeah.
back to the beginning, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think you do that, but like I said earlier, I think what the NBA should focus on is the celebration of basketball. What is some things that you like seeing when you play basketball and go out and play with friends? You see 1v1, you see 2v2, 3v3.
Yeah.
So why not have the top 24 players that are assigned all stars? Why not have them 16 teams of two? So you have 16 teams, 2v2. I think one of the things that the All-Star game really needs is incentive. So you have this be something that you're playing for, 2v2. You do the tournament. Actually, it's a good way to play around with the whole 1 through 16 format as well, right? So it gives you the opportunity to test that out for the playoffs. Winner actually gets home court advantage in the playoffs. That gives you that competition right there. Because if I know that based on the seeding of my team and the seed and the outcome of this 2v2 tournament, that I'm able to actually get home court advantage throughout the playoffs, I'm going to fight hard. But there needs to be something that gets these guys going that is beyond just money. That's beyond just the competitive aspect of it. What are we actually fighting for? But if you have it formatted this way, I think it incentivizes guys automatically.
Des, I want you to give final thoughts on Derek's proposal for it. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that that could sell, that could play? Where are you on it?
Yeah, I think there's potential. I'm more so thinking of, so does that eliminate All-Star Saturday entirely? Because the WNBA just did their Unrivaled thing. That took 3 days for them to finish that whole 1v1 tournament. So do you see that being like that long?
I still see the 3-day thing. You know, still do dunk contest. Still, I think bring in the 1v1 as a replacement for the skills challenge, because we saw the skills challenge. We don't. Are y'all actually care about the skills challenge? Personally, I don't care. I think you bring in 1v1, you do the dunk contest, and you do the 3-point contest. I think that makes it a little bit better. I think that makes it more appealing.
All right, well, my final thoughts on this, and we're going to get to the other half of the NBA, is I think any particular proposal that you're making, Derek, and even to what you were alluding to regarding Unrivaled one-on-one tournament, is that there has to be an acknowledgement of how the NBA is selecting its all-stars. Because I think there's a very legitimate argument that can be made that we are still running into the same problems. I don't have a problem with the idea of some all-stars being snubbed. I have a problem, though, that we're not properly acknowledging guys who actually are having an all-star caliber season, regardless if they're on winning teams or they're on losing teams, because that was not what this was meant to be for, in assuming that a person is deserved to be an all-star, and I think if that is going to incentivize us getting an opportunity to see all of our all-stars, whether they are winning or losing on a particular weekend, I'm all for it. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And with me, my special guest, Derrick Meyers, co-host of the Sideline Guys, and my man Desmond Powell, hip to the games. Coming up, we're going to dig a little bit into the second half of the season. We're going to give our perspectives of who might actually be playing worthy. And one thing that I think we might be thinking about and saying, got to be looking out for this, as we are watching the remainder of this NBA regular season. You don't want to miss out here on The Baseline. We're back. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast with my guest, Derrick Meyers, co-host of the Sideline Guys, and and my man Desmond Powell, host of Hip to the Games. And we're about to get right into what the second half of this NBA season is. It's not really half. I mean, it's only probably like maybe a handful of games still remaining to go. I can't even believe it, man. We're almost past the midway point of February. We're going to be talking about end of the NBA season, by the end of April, beginning of May, right? And then we're going to be talking about playoffs. So I'm going to start with you on this one, Desmond. Which team do you think will be impacted the most by the moves that were made for the remainder of the season?
So I actually wrote down 3 teams. One of them I'm kind of still on the fence about, but I guess for 2 I can say the Miami Heat and the San Antonio Spurs. And the reason why I say the Miami Heat is because I feel like them sitting in that play-in conversation, getting a guy like Andrew Wiggins, getting the defender that Davion Mitchell is, those 2 to me are really nice. Like, okay, like let's beef up our roster in any way we can. Obviously losing Jimmy Butler, but like those are some really sneaky, I think, pickups for them in how especially that bottom half of the East is. Like, to me, Miami has always been really good when they do it by committee. They have these hungry guys, egoless, selfless guys who are gonna lock up, who are gonna play for each other. Like, to me, Andrew Wiggins and Davion Mitchell really fit that mold, and I really like what Miami can potentially do, or at least lock up a legit playoff spot with those acquisitions. Now,
Yes, I think that to your point, Desmond, I think leaning more into the fact that this team can really be better defensively, and then score by committee might be the way to go for a team like the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference.
yeah, I love teams that do it by committee, especially in this era now that we're in, where it just seems like there's so much parity and anybody can truly, we always heard that, but like truly anybody can get it in this league. So I love that for Miami. And then San Antonio's pretty obvious, having a guy like De'Aaron Fox to go with Wemby and still keeping Stephon Castle, CP, all those guys. They also have a lot of hungry young talent over there. I think a lot of guys that fit with De'Aaron Fox's open court style of play. They're sitting 12th right now. I believe it's 23-29, but that's why you really got to look forward to what they're potentially going to do this home stretch, because they're definitely looking at the play-in at least. To me, if I'm the San Antonio Spurs, I'm looking at that 9th spot. I'm by the end of the season, I'm trying to switch with the Sacramento Kings. That's the mindset that I would have if I were them.
But, it's interesting that you mentioned the Sacramento Kings, because of those teams, that is the only team that I feel is the weakest at this moment in time, given the amount of games that the Spurs are going to have to make up, and given where the other teams sit and the adjustments that have made. So, Derrick, I wanted to get your perspective on, which team's trade will impact the rest of their season.
I agree wholeheartedly with you on that one, Desmond. I'm going to throw in the Lakers, though. I think the Lakers, not having that big, honestly, I really don't think that. I know a lot of people were high on this move because it's Luka, but when you don't have a big down there, and then truth be told, Luka and LeBron are not the best on defensive assignments. So I'm not going to sit here and automatically throw them into the top 5 at the end of the season. I do think that they're going to end up slipping down in those standings. I think they could possibly be a play-in team. I think a lot of people are going to be a little, get a little up in arms when saying that.
You think the struggle is going to be real for the Los Angeles Lakers
Yes.
for the stretch of games? Okay.
Yes, defense wins championships, and if you can't play defense and you can't guard the rim well, I don't see how that works for you. I really don't. And I think the Mavs can get impacted by this too, by not having Luka and AD being out.
I was going to ask you, I would be very curious to see what the remaining schedule is going to be for the Los Angeles Lakers, to your point, to see if whether or not the matchups are going to be heavily in the favor of the opposing team, because they have a more formidable front court line that, again, rookie head coach, rookie partnership with Luka and LeBron. I think everybody's leaning on the magic of Luka and LeBron and what they can do offensively. But to your point, I think with this remaining schedule and the gap that's between 5 and 10, teams that obviously don't have stoppers or guys that can make clutch defensive plays in order to give you those extra possessions might be a concern, which I didn't. I actually flipped it on the other side to your point and thinking that because of Luka, it would secure them a little bit better because no one did anything significant below them to completely give me the perception that they're going to leapfrog the Lakers when you arguably have, when healthy, the best player in the game next to Jokic and next to an Anthony Davis and a Jason Tatum. Like, the argument could be made that yes, the Lakers still have one of the best players, one of the best clutch players, and can always give them an opportunity and chance for them to at least maintain, which is something that I think we were scared about if you still had Anthony Davis on this team and he's just not 100% and struggling through the remainder stretch of games that the Lakers have.
Yeah, no, I think one of the things that you have to focus on is defense. I don't care how this game goes in terms of the future of basketball. Defense is always going to have to be a big part of it. If you are not able to defend the rim, you're not going to go far. I like, you're going to have flashy games. You're going to have nice moments. I think that's what we'll see from the Lakers for the rest of this. And I think, honestly, the thing that the Lakers should focus on with this move is how LeBron will be able to impact Luka in terms of taking care of his body. That's that. If there's anything else you get from this, that to me is probably the biggest portion of that trade for Luka moving forward. I don't think anything was really wrong with him. I think you can always take care of your body, though. I think you can always get better. And if he's able to improve in that area, I mean, it's not like we're sitting here talking about someone that was 50 pounds overweight. That I think they were kind of exaggerating that a little bit, but that I think is going to do well for them moving forward. But yeah, for the remaining of this season and going into next season, I don't see how the Lakers are positioning themselves to have a good run, at least to finish off with LeBron in LA, if you're not going to have a big that's going to be there to build with them.
Derrick Meyers, my man. All right, so let's transition ourselves here, Desmond. Let's talk about the race for the 2 seed. Where are you with? We already know that the Thunder and the Cavs are pretty poised to be the top seeded teams, barring a collapse, with the remainder of games. So let's talk about these 2 seeds. Who do you see coming as a 2 seed in the East West? It's clearly a run between the Celtics and the Knicks, and then there in the West is a 3-way race going on with the Grizzlies, Nuggets, and the Rockets. Where are you on who's going to be 2 seeded in the East and the West?
So yeah, I actually think I feel like it's gonna play out how it is. So I think the Celtics. I know you guys are gonna like that. I do have the Celtics as a 2nd seed, and then the Grizzlies.
I don't like it. Where did you get this thing that I like? I don't like it. They should be the 1 seed. I don't like it at all.
But yeah, the thing about the Celtics for me is like I've sensed that there's been a little bit of panic, but I'm really sticking with them because the second one is supposed to be hard. Now I'm not saying they're going to win the finals, but with that in mind, I'm like, let's chill out a little bit. Like they have had some battles. They're battle tested. I know health is always a question, but the second one is supposed to be hard. If you feel like your championship run is easy just because you won, something ain't right. So I think the Celtics, if they can lock in these last handful of games and say, you know what, like let's get back into form. This is what this is for. Are any of you surprised? Like rally the troops and let's try to get number 2, because a lot of people are sleeping on us because of whether you want to talk about the threes or whatever's going on in Boston. I just think I have a lot of faith in them to figure it out, because your second run is supposed to be hard, and I trust them to figure it out. Now the Grizzlies, I was very tempted to pick the Nuggets actually, and for some reason the last few seasons I've just been really high on the Nuggets. I think Jamal Murray has really figured out like after what's felt like months of people coming after his game and whatnot. I really feel like he's figured it out and gotten to a nice rhythm here. And obviously Jokic doing what he's doing is just, he just seems to get better when you think he's plateaued. And Russ bringing such a great dynamic to that team. But I think depth wise, the way the Grizzlies are able to find ways to win no matter who's playing, to me is like their biggest cheat code that they have. The fact that maybe if Ja Morant's not playing, we can still go into an opposing team's building and win a game. Or maybe Ja Morant is playing. Well, great. That's more for us. And I think they've empowered plenty of young guys on that roster, who are going to step up in those games again. Even if you may not look at it from an offensive standpoint, a guy like the rookie Jalen Wells, this is a guy who's probably going to get a lot of those primary matchups in the playoffs because of what he's shown defensively. So I think there's a lot of depth there that they can play with that, it can get a little scary come playoff time in this last stretch of the season. So I'm rolling with as it is, Grizzlies and Celtics, but it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Where are you with it, with Derrick? Who do you have running in number 2 for the East and 2 for the West?
Yeah, no, I agree with Desmond on the East. I think the Celtics are going to get that, unless the Cavs drop in the next month or two. I think they will get that.
You can only hope. Sorry, that's the bias in me. Sorry, we can only
say it one more time.
We can only hope. That's sorry.
Look, to be honest, I don't think the Celtics care right now. I think that there's been a lot of issues with people running to panic over, a team that, if you actually put context to it, they've been playing well into the postseason for years. And when you go on a run like that, I personally didn't expect them to stay or go to and stay at 1 all season. That's unrealistic. Especially starting off with Porzingis on the bench. And then when you have to incorporate him back into the lineup, that definitely throws a lot of rhythm off for a good minute. They got back into the rhythm probably within the last 3 weeks. If you've been watching their games, they have been firing on all cylinders. A couple of ticky-tack things happening every once in a while, but for the most part, they look the part. And the fact that they were able to get Torrey Craig, I think that's a very underrated move. I have the Rockets in the West, to be honest with you. I think that it's going to be very interesting, an interesting stretch over the next couple of weeks. But I have a sneaky feeling that they're going to be able to get that. If it's not them, I think that Denver can push for it. But I think it's one of the two. I'm not sold that Memphis will be number 2. I think Memphis could get to 3 or 4, but we'll see.
Yeah, real quick. I think the Celtics will wind up being the 2 seed. I think they're just going to figure out a way for them to be the 2 seed, and they're just confident in wherever it is that they're going to need to be. They know that the road to any championships, you got to win on the road. And the Celtics have proven that they can go out and they can win on the road. The other teams have to prove that against them in a 7-game series more than anything. When it comes to the West, you all bring up some really good points. I'm going to say this, because I keep putting the Denver Nuggets in that conversation just because how do you not put them in that conversation when you got Nikola Jokic? I'm sorry. He is essentially the force, as our man Bart Scott would say, he is the force multiplier. When he is on in the playoffs, you can't stop the damn guy. Okay. And you can ask Anthony Davis that, right? The Oklahoma City Thunder found their Jalen Williams as the Houston Rockets found their Amen Thompson. And I think the only question that's going to come into play for this run is, will the Rockets finish the deal? Because remember, last year, they had an opportunity to get into the play-in, and they flamed out. And part of it is because they just didn't have anyone coming off of the bench, or they didn't have any role players to get significant points or make significant plays down the stretch. And Udoka had to burn out his starters. I think the tables could be turned very quickly come this year because of Amen Thompson's performance through the course of this regular season. So I think people need to pay eerily close attention to the Houston Rockets, because if they're hanging around, they could very easily find themselves being the 2 seed, no question. And that Thompson factor could be huge when we're making these predictions about what kind of run the Houston Rockets can ultimately have. And I think the same thing can be said to your point, Desmond, about the Memphis Grizzlies with Jalen Wells. So you're looking at these teams. Julian Strawther is another person for the Denver Nuggets. So all three of these guys, I feel like, are X factor guys that I think will have a significant say on whether one of these three teams are going to be the 2 seed. In the end, I think it's going to wind up being the Houston Rockets. I think, to your point, Derek, there's something about Udoka and how he's coaching these guys. I don't think he wants to see these guys flame out 2 years consecutively. I think he figures out a way to get them as high as possible in that playoff picture to give them the easiest path they can by getting home field advantage where necessary. And I think a lot of that is because of what he's getting from his role players. All right, finally, guys, let's get right into the play-in predictions. Who do we think are going to be play-in worthy for the East and the West? I'll start it with you, Derek.
Well, I think that personally think it's going to probably stay relatively where it is right now. I think the Sixers are going to maybe push it a little bit, getting that 10-9 spot. But I agree with what Desmond said earlier. I think the Heat actually improved their roster. We could possibly see Orlando slide just a little bit. I mean, depending on how you get, their health has been up and down all year. So I think that's going to be the only determining factor with that. But I think it is relatively going to stay where it is right now. For the West, very possible it stays. Very possible it stays where it is too. I think the funny thing about the play-in for the West, I'm intrigued to see what the Warriors are going to do. I think coming to this, the Warriors looked the part for about the first, want to say about like 3 weeks or so, and then they flamed out. I think they're going to be very interesting to watch going into the play-in, because if you miss it, what the narrative at that point is going to be, what do you do moving forward? I've been very vocal about this, but I think that one of the things that they should have done a while ago is move on from Steve Kerr. I personally think they would have been a lot further along had they kept Mike Brown. So that the Mike Brown situation is where I'm very torn, because also with him being fired from the Kings, I thought they had an opportunity to push going into the second half of the season, depending on what they did with the roster. And I mean, they're doing a good job right now. Honestly, going into the break, they were looking pretty well. But I think that it's going to be interesting to see where they go. I think they're going to stay relatively where they are right now. But man, I think one of the things that we have to talk about is Minnesota, because if you slip any further, now there's going to be conversations I think that people need to have about not only Minnesota as a team, but where you're ranking Anthony Edwards. I think that needs to come into a discussion going into next season if they were to miss, because he just came out and said this weekend that he has no interest in being a face of the league, that he wants to just be one of the guys that goes in and bust ass and keep it moving, which I think that's cool, but to one extent. But on other, I don't think that it makes a lot of sense if you're talking about a guy that is actually one of the faces of the league. So I think this play-in for the West is going to have more ramifications going into next season for the West and for the East.
Very intriguing take on your part, Derek. And actually, I liked how you kind of commingled that the play-in predictions will have a way to kind of also determine storylines that are going to impact the offseason, depending on where teams land and what the outcome is going to be for, those players and essentially the organizations, moving forward. Desmond, how about yourself, man? Who do you have as your play-ins, East and West?
Yeah, so for the East, I got Orlando sitting at 7 still, and I think Miami, like we've said, they can get that 8th spot. To me, the West is way harder than the East. But I just like what both of those teams have in the East. Obviously, you anticipate the Magic, if they're able to stay healthy, their seeding, like they can sneak up on whoever they get in the first round because they've had so many injuries and still been able to stay afloat. If they're healthy, it can get they can sneak up on their matchup. And I think likewise with the Heat. Now for the West though, I mean, it's just it's so much to think about because like if how long is Anthony Davis going to be out? How are the Mavericks, while they've shown they can win without him, are they going to be able to stay afloat in that 8th spot? And say they get that spot, you got OKC. Like I have faith in Dallas just because to me they look like one of the better teams even without Anthony Davis. I think for somehow some way they're just able to get wins against good teams, get wins against regular teams. Like to have Klay Thompson can still get hot on occasion. Kyrie has looked really good as the primary ball handler. You have PJ Washington who can knock down shots, but he's also somebody that I think plays impressive defense when he's locked in. The two you still got rim protectors even if without Anthony Davis. So it's like, and obviously Max Christie, like they got role players. They got a lot of pieces that I feel like okay, they might be okay. But to Derek's point, like Minnesota, I still have questions over. Even like the Suns, low key. Like again, if you think about Anthony Davis missing time and maybe windows of opportunity kind of coming in for other teams, and they're looking in like, okay, we might have a shot. Do you think Devin Booker and KD are gonna like channel that in? I don't think so. I don't have supreme faith that they will, but it's just a lot with the West. Even the Warriors, like I watched that first game when Jimmy got to the team, and just the dynamic he brings them off rip is something that I think is going to translate directly to the play-in playoff atmosphere. But again, you have those questions of like, is it going to be enough in the grand scheme? Like, sure, you get Jimmy Butler, but is it going to be enough to carry you to the playoffs? Is it going to be enough to get you through a series? I don't know. I don't know. It's a lot. I feel like I just wrote down the T-Wolves and Mavs for sure. But there, and again, like I said with the Spurs, like you just don't know, man. It can all change in these last few weeks. But I guess I'm gonna just play it safe. I'm gonna go T-Wolves and Mavs because they're right there right now. But there could be some other teams that could sneak in.
I'm gonna basically end it in this particular perspective because to me, what we're saying is that there's going to be a little bit of fluctuation, but I think the status quo is going to hold. I think if the Phoenix Suns do not figure out a way to make this run, they will be the most intriguing of what will take place in the offseason. Because then now what are we really talking about with regards to there's no way you can run it back with Durant, Beal, and Booker. So now one of those players is going to change the dynamic of what we're going to be looking at in the offseason, right? Whereas all of these other teams, the risk that is being taken in the West, whether you're Golden State, whether you're the Kings, whether you're the Mavs, or you're even the Timberwolves, who remember they are the catalyst of this crazy wild ride that we had of the season when they moved Karl Anthony Towns, fresh removed from them playing in the Western Conference Finals. So, look, man, I think these other teams did what was necessary to make sure that the Phoenix Suns and the San Antonio Spurs might still have to be looking up at them when it's all said and done. This has been a great show, man. Like we could spend another hour and a half talking, man. I'm telling you right now. So I know that this will not be the last time that we, get together and collaborate and speak on these things. But as always, man, this is going to be a hell of a stretch run of games left to go. Derek, any final thoughts about where you see things panning out for the remainder of this regular season?
Actually, I think the point about the Warriors, I think I'm actually looking at the Warriors and Phoenix going into the playoffs offseason. Because if you heard, KD didn't want to be traded there. He wanted to finish this season out. That doesn't mean he doesn't want to go next offseason. I think that's the most intriguing part about this. I think I'm willing to put it out there right now. I think KD is going to go back to Golden State next year, figure out some way, because Phoenix shouldn't have done what they did in the first place. So I think that they made their bed last year, getting Beal. So that was that. This was already going to be a foregone conclusion for them, having this type of situation. But those are the two teams that I'm looking at for the rest of the year to see what happens for the next season.
Final thoughts, Des. Whoo, my man, throwing out the flames before we even starting the fire. I love it. What's up, Des? Talk to me, man.
Absolutely. So one thing I was thinking about over the course of the episode, and I didn't really touch on them because of this, and that's the Houston Rockets. And it's interesting because I'm a fan of them like anybody else. I love the rise that they've had this year, but and granted, these were games that they weren't fully healthy, but watching that little road trip they had in New York playing against the Knicks and then even the Nets, I was looking at some of their like late game execution, and I'm like, something's not right. Like, to me, they were very clear test games, right? Like, oh, okay, Jalen Green, you balling now. Okay, Amen Thompson, like you done figured it out, twin. But who is going to make the decisions when you don't maybe have a Sengun who's probably in foul trouble, or when Fred VanVleet's not out there? Like, to me, those were some really good, and I think even some of the other games in that stretch, not just those two, but I felt like the Rockets had a lot of test games of like, hey, y'all are great, but y'all are still very young, and there's a lot like you're going to be dealing with come playoff time, come play-in time, in terms of strictly game management, right? Not even just X's and O's. We know y'all can ball, but in terms of game management, especially managing a game in the playoffs is way different than managing a game in the regular season. You got to think about the series. Every possession means something. You got to slow that game down. You can't be speeding up the court, turning the ball over, trying to shoot a three when you can eat the clock. Like, it's a lot of that stuff where I'm nervous about Houston, and especially because you have a Dylan Brooks who, granted, isn't necessarily seen as a scorer, but this dude is not shy to take a big shot. So if he takes that shot instead of Jalen Green, how are they going to react to that? If they don't throw it into Sengun first, how are guys going to react to that? Obviously, you trust Ime Udoka to keep that and have everybody fall in line. But again, it's not that I don't think Houston can be successful, but it's just that's something I got my eye on, man, as we finish this season, because they're a great young group, but I wonder, is that immaturity going to show a little bit once they get to when it really matters?
So that's the reason why I'm rolling the dice and thinking that, the clock will not strike twice on them this time around. I think Udoka probably learned his lesson, understanding the kind of roster that he's working with, and is going to have to manage these guys through that rough patch or through those situation and moments. That's going to probably best equip them to be arguably one of the more dangerous teams in the Western Conference. What an awesome conversation, fellas, man. It's just always great to be able to chop it up with some of the premier analysts and commentators and sportscasters that are going on. My man Derrick Meyers and my man Desmond Powell. Again, if you guys don't know, now you know. Be sure to check out my man Derrick Meyers, co-host of the Sideline Guys, OTS Media, and my man Desmond Powell, hip to the games. As always, man, we appreciate everybody for hopping on board with us this week. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We hope you enjoyed the collab for the Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. You know we do. And we'll catch up with you next time.